Elaine Cleary, Customer Success Director at Gainsight.
Hello, everyone. I'm back quickly. I think we're making up for a little bit of lost time. There are probably some people coming in and out, but we going to their next sessions. But we have another interesting debate topic that we're going to jump right into today. And if you were in any of the debates that we've had before, I'll share with you how this format works. First of all, we're going to take a poll to see if you think CSMs should do onboarding and support. So we're going to start with a poll. Then our two wonderful presenters here are going to share their perspectives on these two things. Then we're going to move to some Slido Q&A. And then finally, we're going to take the poll again and see if anyone has changed their mind based on the information that's shared here today. So should CSMs do onboarding and support? I'm taking a look at the Slido poll right now. The numbers are jumping around quite a bit. I'm going to give it a few more minutes for folks to trickle in and vote. I think you guys both may have your work cut out for you today.
Is this a counter of how many people are paying attention or voting? Because I've been out there. I know that a lot of people aren't paying attention. They're just here for the comfy seats.
I think they're paying attention. I do. These debate sessions have gotten some good feedback so far. I think it's interesting to hear everyone's perspective. So we're going to go ahead and close down the poll. It looks like we're going to start out with about 45% saying yes for onboarding and no for support.
Split.
29% saying no for both. 24% yes for both. 2% no for onboarding and yes for support. I wasn't expecting that.
No, I'm surprised about those in general, I think.
Yeah, I am as well. And 0% for I don't know. So everybody has an opinion. That's a great place to start. I'm going to turn it over to both of you, and I'll be back out for some Slido Q&A after you've had a chance to present your case.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, everybody. I hope this is interesting for you. It's nice to see so many people grabbing the good seats ahead of Professor Brian Cox coming along later, so that's good news. I'm going to introduce myself first, do my little bit, and then hand over to Russ. So just moving on. My name's Shirley Chapman. I am the EMEA Director for Customer Success in Pluralsight. I've been at Pluralsight for 3 years. We're a very fast-moving company. 3 years at Pluralsight, I often say it's a bit like doggy years at Pluralsight. So it feels a bit like 25 years. We move so fast, we get so much done. But it has, in fact, just been 3 years. I'm going to start with giving you my context. One of our company values is to seek context with intention, which is something that I live by every single day. So just to give you some context there, I think some of the formatting's gone a bit skew-if, so I apologize for that. Pluralsight is a technology learning platform. So essentially what we do is we help individuals and companies to manage the incredible pace of change in technology by maintaining their skills. So for individuals, maintaining their skills so they're relevant in the workplace. For large organizations, to help them understand the skills that they have and to map a way forward to the skills that they actually need. So with digital transformation in particular, it's been a massive shift in terms of technology skills, so we help our large customers through that process. We were actually founded back in 2004 as a face-to-face training company. But the founders very quickly realized demand outstripped their ability to deliver that, so they moved on to an online solution. And really from there, it's just been an exponential growth. You're going to see a couple of similarities, I think, here, Russ, on your slide as well. So our headquarters is in Farmington, which is just outside the lovely Salt Lake City in Utah. So Silicon Slopes, I'm sure you're all aware as well, it's a tech hub. Amazing place to be if you've never gone. If you love skiing, snowboarding, outdoor life, absolutely fantastic place to be. We also have an office in Boston, and this year we opened our EMEA headquarters in Dublin. So we've gone from 0 to 60 employees from February this year onwards. We also have a whole group of remote employees as well, of which I am one. In total, we have about 1,100 employees around the world. And you can see that we partner with some of the biggest names in the business. For example, Microsoft, Satya Nadella has actually said publicly that he's a a Pluralsight learner, which was nice to hear. We have, obviously, a wide range of customers across the globe. The information there on the revenue gives you a kind of idea of the scale of what we're doing. Probably the more important part there is the growth. So this is our 6th consecutive growth of more than 50% in the B2B business. So we're going through a massive, massive growth period. That is public information, by the way. We also went public this year, which was fantastic. A lot of celebrations went on around that. So that's who Pluralsight is. I'm just going to take you on a quick journey of where we've come from in terms of success. So I should mention our support organization. We've had a support team for a long time, so CSMs are not doing support, but in fact our support team as of Monday is now within the success team. So they've moved their reporting responsibility into success. And again, the success team is not just customer success, as you'll see in a second. But just to go back, as I say, not so long ago, January 2017, we were a very small, I'd like to think beautifully formed group of CSMs. So there weren't many of us. We were incredibly experienced. We'd come from enterprise customer success from many different companies. And we were doing absolutely everything. Right? So we were doing pilots, we were doing pre-sales work, we were running reports for customers, the normal customer success stuff as well. And we were pulled in a million different directions. Right? But we did the best that we could. We were very focused on our large enterprise customers. So the other problem with that was we weren't actually able to reach our smaller customers. So that's where we were not so long ago. It's quite scary really thinking that it was quite recent. And then last year there was a massive investment in the success organization. So a couple of changes here. First of all, if you look at the taller bar there, we also introduced a commercial CSM team as well. So the commercial motion, that's customers with a smaller, what we call a total addressable market. So customers who have X number of technology employees, up to a certain limit, we will call them commercial customers. So it's very much more of a sort of low-touch motion, high volume, a different set of skills, to be honest. We also increased the number of enterprise CSMs we had. We also introduced, and this was a real game changer, solution architects. So the solution architects are our pre-sales team, and they are really the first touch for the customer in many ways, along with the sales team. So their role is to focus on the goals and the problems and the needs of our customers. And originally it was quite a small team. They're doing a fantastic job. You'll see in a second that that team has grown significantly. But there is a very close partnership between the solution architects and the customer success manager, and obviously the handover there is key. We also started introducing specialist roles around implementation and content. Pluralsight has over 7,000 courses on the platform covering a huge range of technologies. One CSM, it's just not possible to know in detail all of the job roles that might touch those technologies, all of the different variants of technologies available. So we have this team that help us, and this is our professional services team. So this is a paid for service. And then we jump to where we are now. So you can see from being small and beautifully formed, we are now quite a large organization. We are around, I think, 45 to 46 CSMs in total around the world. We have far more solution architects doing that pre-sales work, and we're really seeing the benefits of that now. So I'll come back to that when we talk about onboarding, but really the work that they're able to do with the customer pre-sale to identify the goals, problems, needs really helps us as we move into a success planning motion post-sale. We've also quite recently introduced technical onboarding consultants. So these are CSMs who are totally focused on onboarding. You can see there's only 3 of them at the moment. A very small team. It's very new for us, but it's been incredibly successful. So I could only see this green bar shooting up in the future. And we've expanded our implementation and content specialist role. So really what we're seeing here is a move from the generalist to the specialist. Yeah, people who do absolutely everything. to those who are specializing in a particular part of the journey. So being Scottish, you probably recognize that by now. I am taking the stance of a no or no. And so that's going to be my side of the argument. It was interesting to see the mix there. We'll come back to that maybe towards the end and tell you how we really do things. All right, so you've probably seen this quote a million times. It was actually in the description for this session. The seeds of churn are planted early. Really, the onboarding experience is so important for the customer, but I'd also ask you to think about, what do we mean by onboarding? Is it onboarding the customer, onboarding, in our case, the learner or the user of your platform? The earlier that we can have a great experience for the customer, the better. I'm just thinking about, the obvious example of onboarding would be when you are about to get a flight. When are you onboarding? Is it when you first try to download the boarding pass to your app on your phone? If you're like me and you're not an Apple fan and you're using a Samsung phone and sometimes you can't get your boarding pass on your phone, it's a really annoying experience. Or is it when you get to the airport, or is it when you're actually getting on the plane? All of those parts are part of the onboarding experience. I think it's something you need to work out for yourself, is when are you actually onboarding your customers and then the users, in our case, the learners. Support is important in that as well. I think, again, if the initial experience that the customer has is not seamless and very positive, right from the very beginning, you're on the back foot. We talk about this a lot internally. If we don't get this piece of the process right, you're already on the back foot as a customer success manager. You're always fighting to try and prove that things will get better and you will get the value from our product. I didn't know that Nick this morning was going to be talking about Einstein. I have to admit that Einstein was not on my wall as a child. I had Donny Osmond and David Cassidy, and that probably ages me pretty well. But I do like this quote, and I like this quote partly because it's a little bit weird. It's a bit odd. Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. I'm not entirely convinced he actually said that, but it's quite an interesting idea. And my thought behind showing you this was, I think all of our customer success managers, they're all really great people, they're all very clever, they're all perfectly capable of doing all parts of the process and the journey. But if we keep measuring them on the things that maybe aren't their strengths, or asking them to do too much, then they can feel that they are a bit stupid, or that they're not valued, right? Or they're not being set up for success themselves. So that's my Einstein moment for the day. My Steve Jobs moment for the day. Usually you get a Steve Jobs quote somewhere in a presentation. Great things in business are never done by one person. Obviously, if you're in a small company, you don't have the luxury of having a whole team of people. But obviously, as you scale, then there are huge advantages of working together as a team, playing off each other, getting ideas, and really kind of focusing on the whole journey from different perspectives and with different mindsets. And Marissa Mayer from our ex-Yahoo also said, when you need to innovate, you need collaboration. And I feel that really strongly in my day-to-day work. We're collaborating across not just the success team, but across all of the teams within Pluralsight. So why do I believe it should be no to onboarding for customer success managers? I think the customer gets a better service when they have a dedicated resource focused on that part of the journey. Usually the onboarding consultants, certainly in our case, they have far fewer customers. They have a customer success manager just focused on that activity. They're not rushing off and doing EBRs and running business impact surveys and working on the next renewal. So they really get a better service. And that allows the CSM, if they're not doing onboarding, to be laser focused on really what they're good at. So trying to avoid Einstein's fish situation here. They're focused on the journey, they're focused on retention. I also think we get the faster time to first value. That's not so easy to say. Again, if you have a team, a group of people who are focused on working with the customer and also working with those pre-sales people, that's what we are really seeing the benefit now, that the work that the pre-sales team do on goals, problems, needs, success metrics, and so on, that's really feeding into the onboarding process. And it's already half the work's done, to be honest. So that then helps the customer be successful and have that aha moment far quicker. And I think we've all been there where we've struggled to get a customer onboarded despite all your best efforts. And then you are, again, on that back foot when you talk about renewals and looking for expansion. You know, if you haven't got all of your licenses deployed by month 9, for example, it's unlikely that they're going to go ahead with any kind of expansion. So that's also an advantage. For us, and this may be specific to us, I'm not sure, but I think the other good thing is giving the customer a service that's specialized. Single sign-on, for us, learning management system integration is important. Our platform's not complex, but our customers are working with quite complex technologies. And for example, the content mapping there, it really helps them to focus on, or helps us work with them to identify what their technology stack is. And customized reporting as well. So, you know, the CSMs can work with what the platform offers in terms of analytics, but quite often, again, customers have very, very specific requirements, and we have specialists who can help them with that. And I really, truly believe this is one of the biggest advantages, is it enables innovation. When you've got people who are specialists, but they're also working as a team and looking at the bit that they are responsible for, that really helps create continuous improvement. Quickly moving on to support. I think the obvious one is, why shouldn't CSMs do support? You know, if a CSM is having customer meetings and so on, they're not, maybe they're traveling to visit customers and so on, they can't, you know, they can't respond to those tickets quickly enough. And I think having a centralized support team also helps create better knowledge management. There was a session that I was in yesterday where they were talking about that, having a team focus on that, getting the, if you like, the trends, the views, and that also feeds into the product as well. But it creates better self-serve options, and that's what we want to have for our customers. It allows the CSMs to be more proactive. Obviously, support is much more reactive. This then allows you to be more proactive and to have those value-added discussions with the customers. And I think this is one thing that is important as well. I think if you're having discussions about support tickets, a learner can't log in, it's really difficult then, and 10 minutes later you're on a call with a CTO talking to him about his technology strategy. So separating those out gives the opportunity for the CSM to be positioned really as a strategic partner. Quicker response times, better responses, all lead into higher satisfaction scores. And I think, again, an important part, CSMs generally will have higher job satisfaction if they're not doing support. I don't know about you, but I certainly didn't become a customer success manager to be answering support calls. So it really helps them do the part of the job that they're good at and usually that they love. And that should then translate into higher job satisfaction. Cost versus productivity gains, I think, again, by taking away support, although it's a non-revenue generating organization, the improvements in productivity gains for the customer success managers kind of pays for the support organization. And lastly, it's just more scalable. So very quickly, my last slide before I hand over to you, Russ. Some takeaways. I thought I wanted to have a bit of a cheesy kind of slide, and this is like really a cheesy takeaway slide, so I won't apologize for that. But this again, there's 3 points here. I think this has been mentioned a million times, probably over the last couple of days as well. But for the customer to get their desired outcome, really, we need to understand what it is they really need, and then what the appropriate experience is to get them there. And I believe that onboarding and having a separate support team really helps with that appropriate experience. But don't just assume anything. You know, I've just mentioned before, we are in the early stages of this specialist role with onboarding as a service, which is what we're actually calling it, onboarding as a service. But don't just assume that it's a great thing. I think you need to test it out for your situation. And above all, as with everything, we're incredibly data-driven. I'm sure your companies are as well. So measure. Make sure that you are looking at your NPS scores. Does it make a difference? look at improved expansion. We are definitely seeing an impact on having the pre-sales team, for example, involved early in the sale. Hopefully you should then see a higher retention rate. There's a better chance of having the goals, problems, and needs aligned to the offering. Again, higher satisfaction should mean lower CSM turnover. I have to say, I don't think we've had any CSM leave our organization, which is a good thing. And then higher feature adoption as well. So by focusing on onboarding and really helping the customer understand the value of the platform, again, really helps them use it to its best ability. So I'm going to stop and hand over to Russ.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So that's the argument against. What I'm going to talk about now is the argument for customer success managers doing onboarding and potentially support as well. Just to introduce myself, I'm Russ. I'm Director of Customer Success for Workfront here in Europe. I've been with the company since before the internet was founded. I'm kidding, I'm not that old. So I started 10 years ago as a professional services consultant and moved into customer success as the company grew and opportunities presented themselves. I've got a lot of admiration for Pluralsight and the work they do, so much so that I stole Shirley's slide and really just tweaked a couple of words because we're very similar companies. We're both from Utah, so we're both from Silicon Slopes. As Shirley said, it's a booming area. We're an enterprise work management platform. We sell multiple products, but it's all centered around the work management platform. So we also sell digital proofing, digital asset management, and a codeless integration platform as well. We've formed similar kind of time as well, early 2000s. We've got offices in Basingstoke and London here in the UK, and also a large office in Armenia as well. Any brand, any company that you come across on the high street, in your business life, in your personal life, pretty much are a customer of ours. And they use Workfront for two main use cases: for marketing, creative, digital work, and also for IT, PMO work. So we've got some great customers, and we're very fortunate to be working with some of those names up on screen and many, many more. Now, to help explain my story today, I wanted to take you on a little history tour, take a step back in time. Back in 2012, we, as AppTask, as our former company name was, started white labeling a product into our service and offering that to our customers. And it was from a company called Proof HQ. They are the digital proofing product that I spoke about a moment ago. Fast forward to 2015, we then went and acquired them to obviously take control of the technology, to expand the opportunity that we have in our own product set. And with that came across quite a large number of customers. Now, it was a fairly small organization at the time. There were 6 customer success managers. There was only one of those in the UK, and the other 5 were in the US. No, sorry, some were in the US. We also had some in Poland as well, I should say. And they were the role that I'm representing today, is this mix of customer success manager in the sense that we think about it, so renewals, expansion, but they also did the onboarding part of the job function as well as some support. Now, the support function really was only in a CSM for a very short amount of time, so I've actually split it out here and said that it's always been separate. And I'm really going to struggle today to argue that support should be part of customer success. If any of you do support as part of customer success, I'd love to hear it, because I don't know how it could work, and for many of the reasons that Shirley spoke about, I think I'm probably going to struggle if I tried, so I'm not going to talk about support too much. And so what I wanted to do is just pull out some of the main key points from the customer success managers that we brought into our organization in 2015, how they operated, and I'm going to talk about how it worked so well for them. So the person that will manage the account will know all about the customer. They'll know what happens from the very beginning. So if you keep a customer success manager engaged in that account, engaged in the actual work that's happening and the ongoing relationship, the touch point with the customer will feel a lot more intimate. One of the things that we've certainly struggled with in larger businesses and in our larger part of the business is that there are multiple relationship points. And if you try and split that out into too many roles, the customer starts to wonder who they should be speaking to about various things. And so for the long term, the trust and the accountability as well sits with one individual, and the customer feels a lot more reassured in that relationship by having that single person. Now, I know there have been some sessions on scaling customer success organizations. I attended one yesterday with Michael and Michelle over in the other area. It's certainly much easier to scale when you are hiring for one role. If you have a specific expertise that you're trying to hire across 3 different roles, we've found that it's a lot slower. And so Proof HQ, before they came into the Workfront business, found it much easier to hire that one-stop shop that does it all, because they could then replicate the model a lot faster. And in terms of the customer, I'm going to disagree slightly with one of the points that Shirley made, is that we found that by having a customer success manager take it on right from the first day and through the early days of the relationship, we were able to mobilize a customer much quicker. And the Proof HQ team were able to get a customer up much faster than perhaps handing over and changing to another role. So I'm kind of going to argue against some of the points here as well. As I mentioned before, one of the problems that we now face a lot, and I hear this all too often, and my stomach turns every time a customer says this the first thing to me, because I know I've not done a good job of bringing them into the Workfront family, but we hear all too often, wait, so I have to speak to Mal, I have to speak to Carol, I have to speak to Vlad, I have to speak to Charles, okay, Russ, I've got you. So who do I need to speak to when? And that's one of the problems we face all too much, is that by having support and customer success and sales, various account managers, there are too many people involved, and it is confusing to the customer. The handover problem is always evident. I don't know whether you call it 80-20 rule or loss attrition of knowledge or what, but every time you hand over to a new person, there's that little bit of loss of knowledge as well. So we found a lot that when we're dealing with very large enterprise customers, our account manager, our salesperson who's going out and acquiring the new logo will build up such a great relationship because they've built up very intimate knowledge. And then when they hand that over to the customer success manager, 80% of that is transferred over. Well, that 20% might have been useful. And then we're going to introduce the professional services organization. Well, then that customer success manager is going to repeat the story, but only remembers the 80% of the 80% that they were told. So there's even less knowledge. So that you do have that handover problem in certainly larger situations where there's a lot of knowledge to transfer. I, in my Workfront history, have also done training as well. I know that training is a large part of onboarding, and the monotony of teaching the same thing again and again and again can be very demotivating. And I think you mentioned that as part of yours as well. So much so that I was feeling really unwell one day. I was doing a training course, and I closed my eyes because I've done this training course so many times that I was just speaking and speaking and speaking. And I found myself going, whoa, how long have I been asleep for? And the monotony of it actually really got to me. And at that point, when I realized I might have been asleep for far too long, I said that we should probably start splitting that role out, and shortly afterwards we did. I'm sure some of you have seen this next one as well, creating the throw it over the fence mentality. When you have this split out into so many different functions, there tends to be, in some cases, and I know, we're all responsible people here, but there does tend to be some occasions where this is my world. Once I've done my job, I'm going to do it and pass it on to the next person to deal with. And so, splitting out the roles, sometimes you can get a, not my job, governor, I'm not worried about that. That kind of throw it over the fence mentality. And then the last thing as well, I just want to say it could possibly be very difficult to scale that. Certainly in the early days, it's difficult to scale lots of different roles. So keeping it all in one role, keeping it all within one person's purview certainly makes it easier to scale when you're starting out. As I said, I'm really going to struggle on this one, so I'll keep this one brief. Reasons for customer success managers doing support: intimacy. Certainly you're a lot closer to the customer. The other thing I thought about as well is that if you've got a customer success manager doing support, What I've found in the past, and maybe this is just my experience, but support people know the tool, they know the techniques, they know how it works, but they don't know the real world. And you know, customer success managers or professional services consultants, you know the real world of how it actually works down on the shop floor. So sometimes I think that disconnection can create loss of value as well. I do want to call out a couple of yeah buts, a couple of what I'm taking for granted, some assumptions here, is that this kind of model works really well only in some sizes or I guess conditions of an organization. Having a CSM doing all of the functions, so the onboarding, the training, and the CSM certainly works in early stage companies, and you hear Dan Steinman talk about this a lot, where you have to treat every customer like $1 million customer. Certainly when it's the difference between boom or bust, it makes sense to keep it all together. The other thing as well, which is really bringing me back to the Proof HQ example, is the low complexity. If you've got a product that's low complexity, doesn't take long to implement, maybe less than 40 hours worth of actual human effort to implement, I would say it's probably not necessary to break out a separate professional services organization. And I'm hoping that that's probably where most of the 45% of you who voted at the beginning are coming from. That you've got smaller applications, smaller products that don't need a lot of time spent on it. Also as well, where you've got tools or applications which generally accepted, a virtual relationship is good for a customer. If you don't need to be on site, if you don't need to be present, and certainly that is typically the case where you have lower price point products as well. So those are just some of my thoughts to kind of encircle the thought about whether you would have a customer success manager do the onboarding or not. I want to leave you with one kind of closing admission statement. The world in which I manage, the customer success managers don't do onboarding. And so I know it has its place, but certainly for a lot of organizations, it's just not really scalable at the larger enterprise end. So with that, I appreciate you've been listening to us for a long time. We'd love to hear some of your questions. Hopefully you've been punching those into Slido. Enter stage right.
Yes, enter stage right. Wow, a lot of great information. Thank you for so much detail. Really appreciate that. For those of you who've been submitting questions, we're in the room Zinc. Feel free to vote them up. We have time for a few questions. We'll bring those up right now on Slido. I actually have some strong opinions on this. I'm going to keep them to myself, but if anybody wants to, catch me at the break. All right, the first question, if the CSMs aren't doing the onboarding, at what point should you introduce them to the customer as their CSM? Before, during, or after onboarding? This is a great question.
Very good question.
Oh, I'm
Go
going
ahead.
first. So it depends on the size of the customer, I would say. So for larger customers, the customer success manager is still introduced before the sale is completed. So that relationship is established early on. With the example I gave of our new technical onboarding consultants, the CSM and the technical onboarding consultant are still working hand in hand. So it's not an either or, it's, as Nick was saying earlier, it's an and. And I think, yeah, particularly for large customers, it should be before, definitely, to establish all of the success metrics and so on and do the success planning.
Yeah, it's the same for us as well. So we introduced the customer success manager pre-sale with our sales guys. They obviously know the size of the customer and where and when it's going to land. So we do introduce it pre-sale. But I've picked up a couple of interesting things over the last few days, which I really like the sound of, which apply more to my argument. My side of the story is that if you have a low touch model or a tech touch model, or you have a high volume of customers coming in, introducing the CSM as part of that tech touch is a really interesting way of doing it. And I think I heard a couple of people say that a customer would get a welcome email or an onboarding point, and if they didn't respond to that or open it, that's when a customer success manager would get involved, and then there would be more emails, and I like introduction being based on triggers. It's a good idea.
I'm a huge fan of that as well as the idea of managing to the exceptions. When the process goes wrong, then pull the CSM in. Absolutely. Great. Next question. What human qualities do you think are best for support and onboarding over CSMs?
Want to go first this
Well, thanks.
Yeah, human qualities. We're getting pretty deep here.
Human qualities, not technical or professional.
Yeah.
Well, certainly patience. I think patience and attention to detail, the ability and desire to want to drill down into something. I loved my days doing professional services onboarding, and something that I looked for when I was hiring a lot of people was a natural aptitude or desire to get involved in stuff. And I would typically ask them, what phone do you carry around? And they'd say, well, why does that matter? And if they pulled out a Nokia 3210, I knew they weren't the kind of person who was really going to be good at support or onboarding. If they pulled out the latest iPhone, I knew that they had more of a geeky side to them.
It's a great practical tip.
Probably be mine.
I think for support, for me, it's obviously patience, attention to detail as well, not making assumptions, I think is a big thing. Not just assuming you know the answer, which I've seen in a lot of support situations where they think they know the answer to my problem before I've actually told them what the problem is. Our support team are great for that, and they also have a fabulous kind of system for questions. I think for support, definitely. For onboarding, again, I think it's being process-focused, having a logical approach to something, and having clear ideas of what the deliverables are going to be, and very much a team player because they are that link between sales and customer success.
All right, great. Next question. There's been an emphasis on CSMs moving away from firefighting or being the everything else department. Can this be done whilst onboarding and doing support?
So for support, I don't think it can be. I think it's definitely you're in firefighting mode pretty much all of the time, even with the best of intention and all the tools at hand as well. I think for onboarding, I think an onboarding person, as I just said, has a process type of mind. So they shouldn't get into those firefighting types of moments. So I think if everything is well planned, well defined, roles and responsibilities are clear, the usual sort of project management type of skills, then I think you can definitely have that happening. I think CSMs definitely should not be in that firefighting mode. It's really what stops us doing our job well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, support is what it is, right? It is traditionally and should be firefighting. I think one of the things that we talk a lot about internally, and I heard yesterday mentioned as well, is that the way you can step away from being in firefighting mode is by having a business structure and an approach to a customer where you're being prescriptive. Certainly in onboarding, if you are telling the customer this is the best way to do something, or this will get you the best result, or these are best practices we're seeing elsewhere, that is a prescription that the customer will value. From a customer success perspective, if you can establish a strategic relationship rather than a personal or a lower level tactical relationship, that's how you can step away from firefighting. There'll always be an element of that, but that's certainly going to make a difference.
I actually think you just answered a little bit of this next question here. Being in a smaller startup where CSMs need to do support and onboarding, what's your recommendation for making sure our CSMs can still work effectively? I think you were just touching on that a little.
Yeah, so it's inevitable that you will want to help please the customer, and if you want to please the customer, you will often get dragged into things that you shouldn't. We've got a great executive level, a VP level in our customer experience organization that is very much about us pushing on them. So our VP of customer support, Nick Bryson, he says, look, I don't want you dealing with support tickets. Let us deal with that. That's our job. And when you've got a VP level team who are of that mentality, that certainly helps you to work more effectively in your role.
I just think being, again, organized, having times of the day maybe where you go back to any support issues that have come in rather than do what I have to admit that I do quite often and watch Slack or email on a constant basis and get distracted. When I first moved into customer success, that was probably my biggest time suck was just constantly looking at emails and so on and thinking, well, I can answer that really quickly. I'll just do it now, and then you never get to those bigger tasks. So I think you have to be really disciplined in terms of time.
All right, we have double-digit votes on this last question that we're going to do before we do our final poll. The last question, do you think that during onboarding all the issues/bugs should be managed by the onboarding CSM instead of support?
Interesting. I wouldn't say managed. I think they should be aware of. So that's where a tool like Gainsight or whatever can really help. I think, especially in the onboarding, you want to make sure that you react quickly to, and that's, I use the word react, you do something with the information that's being surfaced. So if there's a lot of support tickets coming in during onboarding, I think there's definitely action should be taken by the onboarding specialist, likewise for the CSM. I don't think they should be managed on a daily basis, like individually, but I think there should be some reporting available to escalate as effectively as possible.
I'm a very strong advocate of making sure the person whose job it is to do something does it. Don't let me fail at your job. You fail at your job, I'll fail at mine, and the opposite, will do great at our jobs as well. I don't want CSMs to do support. No. That's not their job.
Let's succeed together, not fail together.
There you go.
Exactly.
We're all in this together.
Yeah.
So if everyone wouldn't mind taking out your phones and going to Slido for Zinc, and let's see how our poll turns out. While you're voting, should CSMs do onboarding and support? I will remind you briefly, for those who missed the beginning of the session, we had yes for both in the initial poll at about 24%, no for both at about 39%, yes for onboarding and no for support at 45%. And then the others were pretty small.
So only changed a little bit by the
Only
way.
a little. We didn't do a good job.
And
We didn't change
I
their
think
minds.
I think what happens is well, first of all, there's some people that could have flipped and we don't know. But I think it's good validation if you came in thinking it should be one way and you heard the arguments for and against. Now maybe you feel a little more confident in your strategy and your approach. Hopefully that's true. I think let's see. We'll give it a few more votes here just to get the final tally. That's a pretty good number right there. All right, we'll close that poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, the winner is yes for onboarding and no for support. Some of you may be surprised by that, some not. Thank you both so much for sharing your perspective today. I appreciate everyone's time. Hope you have a great rest of Pulse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pulse Europe 2018 will continue after a 15-minute break.